Welcome to the World Class Speaking podcast series. This is a place where you will learn how to present, persuade, and profit by improving your communication skills. Each episode in the series is a chapter from the book World Class Speaking in Action. And each chapter is written by a certified world class speaking coach. I'm your host, Matt Miller, and I've carefully crafted and summarized each chapter in the book. A world-class speaker knows that every audience will have the following thoughts on their minds. So what? Who cares? What's in it for me? We speak to create change in others. And whether you're a keynote speaker or a business professional, incorporating at least 4, if not all 5 pieces of the parts formula will help you create compelling content, avoid data dumping, and offer value to your audience. This is episode 12, Uncovering Your Parts Formula, PARTS. It's an acronym. We're going to get into what each of those letters stand for. And the author of this specific chapter is Rina Romano. And Rina Romano is a certified world-class speaking coach, as well as an author, trainer, award-winning speaker, presentation skills instructor, and certified leadership and speaking coach. Now, why is this episode important? Because by incorporating the parts formula, you will have a proven framework to stand by that will enhance and optimize your speech. So the parts formula, PARTS, it stands for point, anchor, reflection, technique, and sale. So the first one is point. The whole point of your presentation or speech is to get the audience to remember your point. A general rule of thumb is that for every 10 minutes, you can make 1 point. And the point should be clearly understood, and it should support the main message of your speech. And there's something called a foundational phrase, which is common in the speaking industry. And what that is it's a short sentence, usually fewer than 10 words, that gets your point across. And it must be brief, concise, clear, you-focused, memorable, repeatable, and possibly rhythmic. Here's a few examples of a foundational phrase. If you want praise, include a phrase. Or don't strive for perfection, strive for connections. Or statistics are boring, stories stop the snoring. If you fail to prepare, be prepared to fail. Those are all catchy lines of less than 10 words. And if any of your content is not revealed, and it's key to make sure that all of your content is relevant to your foundational phrase. If it's not, it must be eliminated. The goal is for your audience to remember your points. That's the main goal, the point. And this is where you want to start. So you want to start by thinking, what is the point? So for the parts formula, the first one is P, points. You want your audience to remember the main points of your story. The next letter is A, and it stands for anchor. And this is super important. An anchor is anything that helps your audience remember your points. There's 4 anchors, and there's the 4 A's. Anecdote, analogy, acronym, activity. Before you give a point, before I say Cleveland is the best city, I need to do one of the 4 following. Anecdote, analogy, acronym, or activity. So you can start with an anecdote, and that's simply a story. You could tell your story, you can make a point. You better have a pretty darn good story to showcase that Cleveland's the best city, and that's going to be a tough sell. But if you could tell the story, make the point, you give yourself a better chance at just telling the point. Another thing is an analogy. I love analogies. Analogy is a comparison. And I love the analogy of squeezing an orange. Let me share it. So if you think about an orange, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out of the orange? Well, you can make orange juice. Whatever comes out of the orange is what's stored inside the orange. When you apply that pressure and that external force on that orange, what will come out is whatever's on the inside. That's the same with a person. If you apply pressure or external force on a person. What comes out is the content of what's inside them. If they have a strong mindset and they're constantly thinking positive, then when you apply pressure to them, chances are they will react well to that situation. However, if you're always playing the victim mindset, if you're always negative, when you apply pressure and force to that person, you're going to have negative come out of them. They're going to crumble under pressure. That's an example of an analogy, comparing an orange to a person when you apply that pressure. Another example of an anchor is an acronym. And an acronym is simply an abbreviation. It is a series of letters that make up certain words. Think about the acronym TALL, TALL. Think, act, laugh, learn. Another acronym would be the PARTS formula, which we're discussing in this chapter, and that's point, anchor, reflection, technique, and sail. And the fourth type of anchor is an activity. An activity could be an action. Think about when you give a presentation, maybe you consider having breakout groups to discuss a certain question, or maybe you have the audience raise their hand and give their feedback. Any type of audience engagement could fall into this category. It's an activity. And then a couple closing points on anchors themselves. Just as an anchor holds a boat securely in place, anchors in your presentation will hold your audiences captivated in their seats. And that's also an analogy. The goal is to make your point known, heard, and remembered. And an anchor is the best way to help you achieve that. And then we move on to R. R is for reflection. Helping your audience reflect on their current situation can create change in them. What do you want them to think, feel, or do differently after your speech? What stories and questions can you incorporate that will assist you in connecting and creating a change in your audience? Be sure to pause and allow them time to reflect on their own situation. If there is no reflection, there is no connection. I believe that getting your audience to reflect on their own lives is the most important part of a speech. I recently had the opportunity to go to a Life Surge event. And what a Life Surge event is, you get entrepreneurs from different walks of life that some enjoy investing, some like real estate, others do speaking. But the Life Surge event that I went to, it was in Cincinnati, and there was probably 6 or 8 speakers. It was an all-day event. And the central theme of that Life Surge event is faith or Christianity. And it talks about how you can build an empire, you can create wealth, but also keep your faith. And a lot of the people, or every speaker that was there, had that core belief that you can make money, but also hold your faith. And one of the speakers there was my favorite podcast host, and his name is Ed Milet. He's got an amazing podcast. He is a master at getting you to reflect while he was speaking. When I got the chance to listen to Ed Milet speak, he gave a story about how his dad was an alcoholic and that how he had to take up responsibilities at such a young age to provide for his family because his dad wasn't there to do it because he was always drunk. And this way that he gave the story, he made you reflect on your own lives. Don't have to have an alcoholic father, but you have some kind of trauma or something that's bothering you. But he got you to think about that. And then when he gave his story, you were thinking about your own life, and it caused so much connection with the audience. And people were so emotionally connected and moved by the speech. And I thought it was the best speech that I've ever listened to. I was so grateful that I got the opportunity to listen to him in person. And those tickets are very cheap. But if you were to go listen to Ed Milet speak and give one of his keynote speeches, it would be a very expensive ticket. His keynotes, I'm sure he gets paid over $100,000. But I think he volunteers for Life Surge at a low ticket because of the core theme of faith, which he's definitely a man of faith. But he was a pro at getting the audience to reflect, and that's the importance of reflection in your speech. And then T stands for techniques. You want to encourage your audience to improve their lives by recommending a specific technique. And here's an example directly from the book. And it said, a lot of times ideas will come to us when we're driving or at the gym, for example. And it's not always possible to write it down. To capture my thoughts on the spot, I use a voice recorder on my smartphone, and I encourage the audience to do the same. When I return home, I transcribe my thoughts and save them in the story file on my computer. That's an example of a technique that's value add that you can give to your audience if it supports the main message of your speech. An example from my personal life is that you have more time to learn than you think. You just have to think of when you have more time to learn. And what I mean by that is I used to never think I had enough time to learn, to read books, to listen to podcasts. But what I realized is that I had to dive into those times throughout the day that I wasn't maximizing my time, that I could actually use to read or to listen. And for me, those were on my commutes to work, that was during my lunch breaks, and it was during the gym. And instead of listening to music at the gym and music at my work commute and music on my lunch break, I could listen to a podcast or an audiobook. So when you're at the gym, you can sacrifice the music and listen to a podcast. And that's an example that I give. So I say, I encourage everybody to train their mind while they're driving in their car and listen to an audiobook or podcast. And then I close it with that same thing that I begun with, saying, you have more time to learn than you think. You just have to think of when you have that time to learn. And then the S stands for sale. And this is the last part of the parts formula. And the cold hard truth is that people don't really care what you do. They really only care about what you can do for them. What is the result that you can provide them? And every speech is selling something, whether it's yourself or a product or a service, something's getting sold. An example from Craig Valentine, and this was very powerful, and he got me to actually buy his offer. It was a free offer. I didn't buy it, but he got me to sign up for his email campaign by putting in my email and getting the trainings. So I was listening to a podcast of Craig Valentine, and when he was done with the podcast, the host of the podcast asked Craig, is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with that's listening? And he said, yes. To anybody out there, do you want to become 3 times better at public speaking over the next year? If so, visit craigvalentinespeakingtips.com and you will receive 1 speaking tip per year for 52 weeks. And something that I forgot to include in that is he mentioned the word free. So he actually said, do you want to become 3 times better at public speaking over the next year for free? If so, visit craigvalent.com and you will receive 1 speaking tip per year for 52 weeks. And what he did was he mentioned the word free, which the audience will always love the word free. And then he started with the result. The result was becoming 3 times better at public speaking. Everybody wants that. It's free. Everybody wants that. Visit this website and you'll receive it. That was very powerful. So I Googled, or went to the URL, craigvalentinespeakingtips.com. And I am currently on that email campaign and I receive a free tip every single week. But think about it if he reversed it and said something like, do you want to receive an email from me every week, 3 paragraphs describing how you can become a better speaker? If so, visit this website. He would not be that successful. But instead, if you start with the result, mention that it's free, you're going to have a lot more success. Now, to bring this all together, here is my example of the parts formula: the point, the anchor, the reflection, the technique, and the sale. I have a speech right now where the point of the speech is to adopt a growth mindset. Now, if the point of the speech is to adopt a growth mindset, then I thought about what anchor can I use to get the audience to remember that point. So I end up sharing a story on discovering my first podcast episode. The point is adopt a growth mindset. The anchor is the story on discovering, my first podcast episode. And then I introduce an acronym, which is STORM, STORM. In order to adopt a growth mindset, you have to go through the storm. You have to be the student, teacher, opportunity, researcher, and mentorship. Then I explain all of those. And then after that, I get into the R, which is reflection. And then I ask the question, by a raise of hands, how much would your life change if you read a book per week for an entire year? And then I go on to say, it's not as much time as you think it would take. The average book on audio takes 7 to 8 hours. So can you find an extra hour throughout your day to read or listen to a book? Consider your commutes to work. Consider your chores and your laundry, your dishes. If you can find that hour throughout the day, you can read a book per week. And I break it down so it's very tactical. And then the technique that I use, which I alluded to earlier, is I say incorporate learning into your car ride, workouts, and daily chores. And then after the technique is the sale. And then I go with, do you want to make more income? Readers make more money statistically. And then I'll cite a source or two. And then sometimes I say the average CEO reads 60 books a year. And that is something that helps add credibility to the sale. To summarize, it's very important to consider the parts formula. Point, the takeaway or your message. Anchor, how the audience can remember your takeaway or message. Remember, it's anecdote or story. Analogy, activity, and acronym. R is reflection. This will happen in stories. If you tell stories or questions, if you ask questions. T is for technique, a recommendation on how to do something. And then S is for sale. Sell yourself. Create a stellar reputation if nothing else. Now that you know the importance of the parts formula, think about something that you've mastered in your life. Think about a technique that you currently do that's helped you. Now, I encourage you to share that with a family or friend, because when you share that, you're giving yourself up, but you're also helping somebody else. In the next episode, you will uncover one of the oldest and proven storytelling techniques to leverage your pain for the audience's gain. Stay tuned. That's all we've got for this episode on the World Class Speaking podcast series. Until next time, remember that becoming a great communicator is so important because it leads to greater impact, influence, and income. Thank you for listening and have a great day.